Hello again, awesomes. All right, so I wanted to talk about Project 3, and this is another level of feedback or area feedback, a feedback area. Okay, this is in response to feedback that I received from the survey I sent out this week, talking about can we look at different levels of the project assignments. And there's a couple kind of embedded this week. Some of the samples for 3060 are sometimes a little more challenging to access and get to and get students to agree sometimes. I'm not sure what the reason is for that, but I do have a small handful that I want to review with you right now. I'm always kind of on the fence about showing samples because I don't necessarily want you just to carbon copy, use this, but templates are good. So, but this will be fun, okay? Because one thing I want you to kind of notice is the difference between these, right? I think I've already kind of talked about this one. I think I've kind of did something like, oh, this is like the the angelic one sent from heaven down. No, this is really good because of its detail and its specificity. And there's a few things I want to mention as we contrast and compare it to this one. Okay, this is another needs assessment sample. So first thing I guess I want you to, obviously this one's on a Google Doc and one's a PDF, so that it looks, there's that to kind of consider. But just think about to, from, date, subject, space, introduction, bold, boom, single space. You know what I mean? You can it just looks professional. So there's a design element to it. I know we haven't talked a lot about design elements in this class, and maybe I need to review that specifically for, this memo, this particular project as. I think they cover that in English 3050. So I think there's that design element. We think about white space. We think about hierarchy. Those type of things are all kind of in play in this particular memo where they are completely absent in one sense from this memo. It's not single spaced specifically. And that's just kind of where things kind of break down. Then we just have this overall difference in this level of specificity. This is what we call a thick description. All right. So in this introduction and talking, while there's nothing necessarily, like there's bad words per se, right? It doesn't have that level of specificity and detail that we read in this one. Improving inaccurate glucose collection methods of DMC labs. And right off the bat, the subject is specific. And if you read this introduction and then you read the audience statement, you'll begin to notice how particularly detailed down to the color of the caps on the tubes that are used for collection, the difference between the two, and that this memo is going to discuss that problem. Those affected by the problem, the research to create solutions, a task schedule facilitating conducting the research needed to determine the ideal solution to our problem. Okay. Ultimately, using this gathered information, a recommendation will then be made to DMCUL to implement in their facility, right? So we've got a very specific audience, kind of as a good transition sense. Student, now we're going to talk about the audience, understanding your stakeholders. It's not just DMC, right? Who is DMC? Not necessarily in the sense of what are their names, ranks, and serial numbers, but more so, what does that mean? The audience and how does this project, who is it going to affect, right? Technicians, couriers, doctors, patients, right? And in what ways, right? So they really do a good job right here of talking about not just that here's our audience, but a thick description of what that means. What does that mean? How does that look, right? This affects the client, right? Or the patient in this case, right? It affects doctors, right? It affects the lab because it affects, as they say here, it's their ethos, right? They're ethically, then it not only is it affecting the name, right, of the lab because they're starting to get this reputation of having these inaccurate readings, but now ethically the patient, right? So you got a credibility issue with the lab itself, and then in another ethical way, it's the patient is really the one who is the greatest stakeholder. I think is how they put it here. The patient is the greatest stockholder identified in this problem, right? There's other people, obviously, but they're the greatest one. And then you'll notice this level of specificity as you read through. I cannot tell you how good this is. In order to best serve these needs to take and to help this audience, here's what we're going to do. Here are some anticipated questions. Here's the questions we're going to use. Here's what we are exactly. Here's the survey. Here are the questions. Here's the survey to these people. Here's the survey to this people. It is that level of detail is so incredible, especially when you compare and contrast it to the